You can never really finish them, but to at least conclude the laws in the Rambam. I wanted to encourage everyone to do them together. We started on our own. However, I understand that while I was gone, not everybody was in the class, and to start now in the middle, people are going to be lost. So it's that ship has a little bit sailed. That's number one. Number two is, I read this Sikha from 1964 on the Rebbe's father's yurtzeit, and it's so profound and it's so relevant to our moments that we're living in that I felt that I had to share it with you. And basically with the whole world, the lessons are extremely timely and powerful and intense. You don't hear the Rebbe speaking this like strongly and directly too often, in my opinion. Okay, so let's take it from, if you have it in front of you, page 307. And I really want to start a little bit down from the beginning of the chapter because we're not, he's talking about a different parsha, etc. So if you'll take it from the third paragraph in. And it's very connected with the parsha that we just read about the journeys, the 42 journeys, which we concluded Sefer Bamidbar with. And ultimately, this whole thing is going to come up again in Sefer Devarim very soon. At this point, the Rebbe is bringing for his father's yurtzeit, which is the 20th of Av. So the timing, interestingly, is still connected. So he says like this, the third paragraph down, please. Hemshech Parshas Hayom Mesupra Odas Ma'ora She'ira B'Sof Shnas Arba'in. In the continuation of the parsha that the Rebbe is learning there, it speaks about what happens at the end of the 40-year sojourn. I made 10 copies. They're all finished? Okay. The 40-year sojourn in the desert, Lamed Tesh Shana L'Acharei Zeh, right? And after 39 years from their outset, this takes place. It says, B'nei Yisrael nasu mi be'eros b'nei Yakan Moseira Sham Meis Aaron. First of all, yesterday was the yurtzeit of who? Aaron. And Rashi. Ah, Chazak.
No, Rashi was the 29th.
Rashi was the 29th. Famously, Aaron is, I believe, the only tzaddik whose yurtzeit is actually said in the Torah. It says on the first day of the 5th month, Aaron passed away. It's very, very unusual and wondrous. And here, it's speaking about something in conjunction with that, because it says the Jewish people traveled from Be'eros B'nei Yakan, which means like the wells of a place called B'nei Yakan, which is a place, and they traveled from there, Moseira, to Moseira. And it says there Aaron died. So that Aaron died, according to this, in Moseira, which is where they came after they traveled first to B'nei Yakan. I'm repeating myself because you need to keep these details in mind, right? B'nei Yakan, Moseira, and there Aaron died. After this, in the Parsha, it says, Be'esahi hivdil Hashem es shevet Levi l'seis es Aaron bris Hashem. It then says, Hashem separated this tribe of Levi to carry the holy covenant, the holy ark of the covenant. And Rashi over there says, Musav le'inyan harishon. That this, when it says that Aaron, that Hashem separated the Levim, it's actually referring to something that happened earlier. But Shana Rishonu L'Tzeis Mitzrayim, even though it's referring to their travels at the end of 39 years, he says this business of separating the Levim actually is referring back to something that happened in the very first year of them coming out of Egypt, when the Levim were actually separated. Who knows when the Levim were separated? But Ta'isam Be'egel, when the Jewish people made their horrible mistake with the golden calf, which happened in the first year, B'nei Levi Lotau, whereas the children of Levi did not make that mistake. They didn't go for it. And therefore, Havdilam Hamakom Mikem. Hashem separated the tribe of Levi from all of us, basically chose them as the princely tribe because they didn't make that mistake. Now, this is being said sort of out of place because we're now talking about something that happens in the 39th year, in the 40th year, I should say, right, where Aaron passes away, and they've gone to this place called Moseira. Would you like to join us? And they've gone to this place called Moseira, which is essentially where Aaron dies, seemingly, which is an occurrence that happens at the end of 40 years. However, in the midst of this, they bring this thing that the Levim were separated, and Rashi has to explain, actually the Levim were separated quite long before this. They're already separated in the first year, right? So why is it brought here suddenly? Umamshich Rashi, how are you? Mamshich Rashi Levaer.
What year is this?
This is happening in the 40th year, right? When Aaron died in the last year.
So 36 years before.
39.
You said it was in the fourth year.
40th, sorry. 40th. This is happening in the 40th.
No, you said it was in the fourth year that the Levim were separated.
The first year. I may have said a lot of things, but you have to go with the truth is the truth. It speaks for itself. So Rashi goes on and explains, okay, why is this line, which is about the first year, what's it doing over here by the 40th year? So Rashi says, Samach mikrazel lechazaras b'nei Yakon. This verse about separating the Levim is Hashem placed it here about them returning back to a place called Bnei Yakan, which is the place, to tell us Sha'af bezelo tauba b'nei Levi, that here too the Levim did not make a mistake. In other words, something happened in the 40th year, which is a horrible error for the Jewish people, and again the Levim shined brightly, and therefore we're reminded about them being separated in the first year here. They stood again in the 40th year on their great faith. They were special people to this day. We give them all kinds of accolades and honors. They're not like the rest of us. Although we did say in a previous class, and this is going to be important for the later part of the Sikha, that every man and woman, and even non-Jew, the Rambam says, the Rebbe learns the Rambam, can basically associate them and claim some kind of Levitical lineage, some spiritual way, if they separate themselves and in holiness and dedicate their lives to God. This is going to come in because Levim doesn't only mean Levim and the Kohanim. It means the real Jews. Please rise, right? Those who were really going to give it all to Hashem. Anyway, back to the point. In this last year, we're mentioning something the Levim did in the first year. They were separated because they didn't sin with the Egel. Why is it brought here? Because again, they stood up and held the faith. What happened? That they had to be given accolades and they kept their faith. And this is what we learn from the pasuk. Bnei Yisrael nasu mi be'eros yakan mosera sham meis Aaron. Let's go back to the verse. The Jewish people traveled from the wells of Bnei Yakan to Mosera, and there Aaron died. So now we have a big question. If you go back and look at the 42 journeys that we just went over last week's Parsha, it says, Ki miveros Bnei Yakan nasu Mosera. Did they actually go from Bnei Yakan to Mosera? Isn't it the other way around? They went from Mosera, they came to Bnei Yakan. It flips the order. Shnemar, we look in this is our Parsha, right? Parsha's Masai, we just read it. Go look, it says they traveled from Mosera to Bnei Yakan, not the other way around. So what's it talking about? They switched it. And also, which is even more curious, where did Aaron HaKohen pass away? We know this. Hur HaHar. Why does it say they went to Mosera and there Aaron died? He didn't die there. Right? Sham Meis Aaron, he didn't die there. Halo Bahor Har Meis. It's a crazy pasuk. It's like totally off, right? Does anyone know what how to answer this? Because it was in Rashi not long ago. Chitas, gentlemen. Seva Chashuv Timsa. You are going to go and you're going to do the calculations and you're going to find Shmona Masaos Mimosera Lahor Har. It was 8 journeys from Hor HaHar where he died to Mosera. Why did they say he died in Mosera when he died in Hor HaHar? 8 journeys away. Ella, turning the page, Avzu minatochacha. Comes Rashi and says, the whole Sefer Devarim is basically a rebuke, Rashi says, to the Jewish people. That Moshe waited till the end of his days to rebuke the Jewish people, just like David did, and just like Yaakov did, and just like Shmuel HaNavi did, and like Yoshua did, right? We just found it in the Rashi yesterday. So too, the whole Sefer Devarim is basically one big rebuke for Moshe Rabbeinu, and this line is also part of the rebuke. Why? Oda sisam zo, says Moshe, you also did this terrible thing. Kishemeis Aaron b'Hor HaHar, l'sof arba'im shana, when Aaron died in Hor HaHar at the end of 40 years, and nistalku anei hakavod. What happened when Aaron died? You may know that the clouds of glory dissipated. The clouds of glory, they were protecting us all through the journeys in the desert, which were nullifying they were lowering the mountains, and they were making the desert bloom, and they were protecting us from our enemies. When Aaron passed away, we realized they all came in the schus of Aaron, and they left, and we were left vulnerable. What happened at that moment? This is yesterday, by the way. Aaron's Yurtzeit was yesterday. So officially the clouds, it's very connected, right? We come into the month of Av, Aaron's Yurtzeit, but also we feel like suddenly unprotected, right? Like our enemies are saying crazy things. They all of a sudden have the chutzpah to think they're going to go and attack us. Why? Because the clouds of glory seemingly disappeared. It's crazy, hashkacha pratis. And it says, what happened to the Jewish people? Yereisim lachem milchamas melech Arad. You became afraid of the king of Arad, a war that he was going to fight with us. V'nasasim rosh lachzur leMitzrayim. Oh, can you believe this? In the 40th year, after all we went through, the clouds of glory went away, and the first opportunity, we tried to make a new leader and go back to Mitzrayim. This happened. Remember, this is not the old generation. This is the new generation, right? Ready to go into the land. We don't hear about this. It's like in one line in Rashi. This is a tremendous rebuke that Moshe was giving us. Chazartem nacharechem shmona masaos. They didn't just talk about it and plan it. They went back and retraced their steps. Not one journey, but 8 journeys. They took off, ready to go back to Mitzrayim.
Why?
Because they didn't want to fight the war, to go into Eretz Yisrael. There was Melech Arad. We didn't have the clouds of glory. I'm not interested. And where do they go to? Ad b'nei Yakan misham Mosera. So even, let's go back and answer our questions. Really, in reality, they went from Mosera to b'nei Yakan, right? But here it says they went from Yakan to Mosera because they were going backwards. That's why it's out of order. And they basically went all the way back to the Bnei Yakan, and then even Mosera, and then it says there Aaron died. He didn't die there, but they mourned him there, and they sort of like stopped the rebellion there, and it was as though he died there, because that's when after he died and things went crazy haywire, that's where they basically caught up with everybody and settled down and mourned him. So it's as if he died 8 journeys back, they were running on their feet. Sham nilchamu lechem b'nei Levi, and what happened there? It was not a simple thing. Just like in the time of the Egel, when the Jewish people fell and Moshe said, Mi la Hashem Elai, he said those famous words, whoever's with God, come to me. And the whole tribe of Levi signed up for the army. So too here, and they had to go kill even it says their own family members, because anyone who worshipped the idol, Moshe said you had to take them out. And here too, Levi went back and they had to fight with the Jews that ran away and created this rebellion. Even some of them, chas v'shalom, were killed. Until they brought them back, and they ended the rebellion. So we've just explained all the confusion of the previous verses, right? Everyone's caught up. It says it backwards because they were going backwards. It says Aaron died there, even though he didn't, because that's where they mourned him. And ultimately, it says this verse in conjunction with the Levim being separated, even though that happened 40 years before, because we're reminded of the greatness of the Levim once again at the end of the journey, that they did the same thing and went back and protected the Jewish people. Got it? In this Inyan, there's a lesson for our times. Yes? They went back to go get the people that rebelled and fight with them until they can bring them all back home. Right? And in the meantime, they sort of finished the battle in Mosera. They rested there. They mourned Aaron there. That's why the Torah says there he died. He didn't actually die there. Now again, the reason I thought this was so profound and I changed the whole Seder to learn this with you is because I do feel intensely that this is basically what's happening every year at this time in the Yortzeit of Aaron. Why do we suddenly go into hysterics in the 9 days and everyone and we have to run around being careful with ourselves? It's all written in the Torah. It's hashkacha pratis. There's a certain level of divine protection which we think sort of leaves us. And you say you have to be careful, don't do business with goyim and all these halachas basically. It's no joke. Because in the beginning what happened here is that we lost the clouds of glory. And therefore we all became petrified and afraid, not all of us, and many even rebelled against the whole mission of Moshe Rabbeinu because of this seeming calamity. So I felt that this, and the message that the Rebbe brings out of here is so relevant for right now, that I just felt we have to mamash strengthen ourselves and all of Am Yisrael with this limud. It really moved me. So the Rebbe right away gets into it. There's a lesson in our times for this. He says, B'nai Yisrael b'kol makom shem nimtzayim achshav b'galus. The Jewish people, wherever they're found right now, are in galus. Mashiach tzidkenu adayin lo ba. Mind you, this is 1964. Maybe there'll be those that want to argue and say that things changed. However, we did just lose, 1,200 Kedoshim, and there's another 100 some in Mamish Gullus in the worst possible captivity. So we can leave all the Perushim to the big geniuses, but I think these words unfortunately stand. That Mashiach has not yet come. And we find ourselves, at least externally, just like the Jews at that time externally. We are afraid of the goyim, and we're considering them like they matter, right? There's Iran, they got missiles, things are happening. Houthis, this one, that one, I don't know, Houthi, whatever their names are, right? In other words, we're not afraid that they're going to tamper with Yiddishkeit, God forbid, but simple physical reality of our lives, like which are connected with the nature of the world, like mischar, right? The business. The stocks are dropping, the stocks are raising. What's going to happen if the president gets assassinated? There's things that are happening here. It's reality. There's also the idea of leadership and heads of state. Who's going to be in control? Is it going to be Biden? Is it going to be Harris? Is it going to be Trump? Right? All these things seemingly are affecting our well-being. And the like. And the Rebbe says, to our great worry and sadness, the goyim presently are in a situation where they're strong physically and the Jewish people are weak. Again, 1964, you learn how you want. But even though the fact that we're found in Galus, we are headed toward the Geula Misva Shlema, the ultimate redemption. We're going to have a perfect land which is good and spacious. Kol Eretz Yisrael b'shleimus. And the Rebbe emphasizes we're going to have the whole land in its fullness, which means presently there are goyim that are occupying our land. They like to say this about us, but the actual opposite is true. Right? There's many parts of the real Eretz Yisrael that is mamish our land. The goyim are sitting there with armies and heads of state. It's mamish. It's wrong. They're occupying our land. We don't speak about it too much. We're busy defending other people who think we're occupying their land. But the reality is we're totally being under occupation right now. All of this country of Jordan, Lebanon, these are parts of Eretz Yisrael. It's loud and clear. The world should hear. Hello. And the Torah comes and tells us, Sheneidah, know this, Kavar haya ba'avar mamru matzav kazeh. There was in the past a situation just like this, where all of a sudden the clouds of glory go away and the goyim are strong and the people are scared and begashmias and they have reason to be scared. Where are the clouds? Who's going to protect us? The whole panic sets in. This is not the first time. But from here, we find out, the true colors come out. Who are the real Jews? Right? That the Jews that are going to Eretz Yisrael and that are going to remain in Eretz Yisrael, suddenly they surface. And they don't flee. There's such a thing called making aliyah. You don't hear it too much anymore, but there was a big thing in the 60s, and I guess later as well, where there was something called making yerida. Right, which means Jews were leaving Eretz Yisrael, because who needs the chaos of living in a war-filled country where you can't even get your mail, right? In other words, Jews basically came here fleeing from some country. Yay, we have a state. When the going got tough, and you can go to Los Angeles and live a good life, why should I put up with this nonsense? You can't even get a good whatever over here, right? So there was this thing called the Yordim, and it was like how they called themselves, Israelis that basically left the country and went to go find better lives in the other shores. And he says, from here we're going to see, when push comes to shove, who are the Jews that are mamash heading to Eretz Yisrael versus those who are, and they're not running away and yordim and going down. But rather, these are the Jews that are called Shaykh to Shevet Levi. The Jews who are in it for real, these are the Levim of today. And they're the same Jews that would not let the Jewish people be fooled by the golden calf. At that time, there was the Erev Rav. Right? What was the claim of the Erev Rav, basically? They said, we have to be like all the goyim of the world. In other words, we're a nation amongst nations. Let's take our place with the United Nations. Let's just be happy that they accept us, Bechlal, to be one of them. Halavai, we shouldn't be a pariah. We should at least be a nation like other nations. I think Golda Meir once sadly and famously said that now there's hookers walking around the streets of Tel Aviv, so now we can be like everybody else. We're just a normal nation like everybody else. Since in Egypt, what's that? I misquoted.
Oh, no.
Since in Eretz Mitzrayim, Shahaisa Aza Malucha Yoser Chazaka, in Egypt was the main country, it was the superpower of the world. And from there, they spread their wings all over the world. The silver eagle was everywhere. The almighty dollar, right? Yeshno Egel Shovdimoso. And in this mighty superpower, they have an ox that they worship, a calf that they worship. And it was really, we borrowed this Avodah Zarah from Mitzrayim. That's where they learned it from. Because they basically said, we want to be like everybody else. They have an egel, we want an egel. They're for the Jewish people also. And that's what the Erev Rav said, Eile Elokecha Yisrael. These are your gods, O Israel. That was the quote of the Erev Rav when the egel popped out of the furnace and it was alive, right? It said it had Ruach Chaim inside of it. And for whatever reasons that Hashem made this miracle for them. And the egel popped out. And they said, this is your God, O Israel. In other words, why should we be different from all the other nations? We want to be like the superpower. B'nai Yisrael, Toni ma Erev Rav, the Erev Rav will make claims that we are an Am Katan, we're a tiny little nation. And Zakuk la'umas ha'olam misvivo, we need the help of the nations that are around us, right? Who's going to arm us? Who's going to give us all these weaponry? What if Biden doesn't let? Yeah? Who's the Erev Rav?
Yeah.
Those who are not the Levim. Right? There are those who want to say that the Erev Rav is like sort of a group of people that like live forever, and they're like these evil-seated people that we have to eventually destroy them. And they bring from the Zohar and the Kisvei Arizal and Kabbalah that there's this like diseased element called the Erev Rav, and they're just a perpetual enemy of the Jewish people. They're the ones who have webbed feet, and they're the ones who are running. What are these conspiracy theories? You know them all.
Lizard people?
They're the lizards. They're everything that you don't want them to be. The Rebbe, I never saw him quoting those sources in the Zohar. I never heard him talking about a class of people. But the reality is that the mentality of the Erev Rav is for sure present, and for sure it has to be uprooted, right? I'm not saying that it has to be, you could point to this one, you could point to that one, right? At this point, Am Yisrael is Am Yisrael. But there's people who are dragged away by this Erev Rav, by this false mentality. And what was their basic false mentality? We should be like everybody else. And therefore, just like they have an egel, we're going to have an egel. Because their claim is, what are we? We're a tiny little group of people wandering the desert. We need the help of the nations of the world. Some nations, like America, we need their help, Pashit. And the other nations, we have to be afraid of them. In other words, we're like in this little political game. This is an Erev Rav philosophy. And in order for us to basically stand our ground in the world, right, with all the nations around us, we need the help of these other nations, of the helpful nations. And how can we get their help? Only if you cut your beard, only if you take your yarmulke off your head, only if you speak fancy words in front of the joint houses of Congress. You have to be like that. They have to basically accept you as one of them. Otherwise, they're not going to help you. You come with your hand out, you want billions and billions of dollars, you better play the part, says the Erev Rav. Since the Goyim worship idols, they have the egel. These are your gods, O Israel. This is the only way we can make it amongst the nations. We have to fit in. We can't just be this crazy outcast. In order to stand up to all the difficulties of the world. But to rely on some kind of a miracle, which would be that, like we say every day in davening, that every goy, each one goes in the name of their own God. But nonetheless, but we're going to go in the name of our God. He said, that's like a nace. You can't just like mamash tell the world to go fife in and you're going to mamash do your own thing and not play by their rules. There, we don't have the koach to do such a thing, Chas v'shalom, says the Erev Rav, since they're the massive majority and we are a tiny nation and we need their help. It's a language of disease inside of our people. We have to finish on a good note. We're not allowed to end anything on negativity. So, up to this says the Parsha, Ein ze be'ofen she'osim es ha'egel v'achar kach holchim le'eretz Yisrael. Don't think that you're going to get away with this and also get Eretz Yisrael, right? You can't all of a sudden grab an egel and think that you're going to sort of make your way with the goyim and sort of play ball and act natural and be a normal person, not some crazy Jew with horns coming out of your head, right? And also get Eretz Yisrael. We're learning from this week's parsha, it's one and the same. What happens when the clouds of glory come off and everyone freaks out? Only the Levim, who are the ones who said no to the egel, they're the ones who are going to say yes to Eretz Yisrael. They're the ones who didn't freak out and panic and run away because they already knew that the only way to get to Eretz Yisrael is to be a Yid. If you're going to be a Yid with all the gusto and you're not going to care what the Goyim say, you're going to claim Eretz Yisrael. If you're going to mamash put yourself into some kind of a jeopardy and try and act like them, first sign of danger you're going to run. How much of my land can I give away to you? Like we said this morning, I'm not trying to jinx the man. I want to give Netanyahu the strength of mamish Moshe behind him to win this war. But he has to do some tshuva because he voted to mamash kick the Jews out of Gush Katif. And I'm not saying this to, God forbid, say negative right now. I'm saying this to remind us all that we can do tshuva. This is not the way to Eretz Yisrael. They thought, let's be like all the goyim. Listen, you want a little peace? We'll take a little peace. Everybody will be happy. That's called serving the egel because it's not what God says. And that's not the way to Eretz Yisrael. And a person who thinks like that, when they see the fight, they're not going to be able, they're going to run from the fight. They're not going to be able to win such a fight. The only way to win such a fight is to mamish be those who destroy the egel and to be a Levi. But there's much more to say for tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.